Is the United States about to strike Iran again? The U.S. demands that Iran end its nuclear weapons program, and today both the United States and Iran sat down again for talks. But as of today's talks, as they wrap up, America is not backing down. Our warships are in the Middle East and is prepared to act if there is no deal. Here's President Trump.
I would say they're bad negotiators because we could have had a deal instead of sending the B-2s in to knock out their nuclear potential, and we had to send the B-2s.
Trump's threat comes as the Iranian regime continues to attack and kill its own people. It's plain the Iranian people want change. Thousands and thousands have already been killed trying to overthrow the regime. The world is watching, but will there be a deal? Or will the U.S. attack? And of course, the other question, should the United States get involved? All this in just a minute. But first, more heartache. We are just learning that the glove thought to be the critical piece of evidence leading to Nancy Guthrie's kidnapper is a bust. Last week, the glove was found 2 miles from Guthrie's home. The Pima County Sheriff sent that glove to a private lab in Florida for DNA testing. On Friday, the lab received that glove. Today, 4 days later, the sheriff announcing the very disappointing news. The DNA found on the glove does not have a match. The FBI previously said the glove had appeared to be a physical match of those gloves worn by the masked suspect seen here in that doorbell video. So now it's been an agonizing 17 days since Nancy Guthrie was kidnapped. No suspect has been named. There is no proof of life. So now what? Crime correspondent Jason Matera joins me from Tucson. Jason?
Greta, it's great to be with you. And actually, just about an hour ago, there was some movement outside Nancy Guthrie's home. That's where we are. You had 2 unmarked vehicles that arrived. They were being escorted by a sheriff's deputy. One of those unmarked vehicles, it looked like a standard crime scene vehicle, but we don't know for sure because it was unmarked. They were not here for very long, about 20 minutes. It looked like they were grabbing something from inside the house, and then they were escorted off the property. And that activity happened just shortly after we got the news from the sheriff about the glove not coming back as a match within the CODIS system. And as you know, the FBI's national database, the CODIS system, it tracks those who already have run-ins with law enforcement convicted of crimes, and their DNA profiles are uploaded in the system. So, the next question, and we reached out to the sheriff to get an answer, is if they really do believe this glove is a lead, will they continue with more advanced forensic testing with the DNA, forensic genetic genealogy, where they can infer identity using hundreds of thousands of markers? We'll see if that's going to be the next step. They did say the glove DNA did not match DNA that has been found at the property. That DNA at the property is still being tested, and they've asked the media for patience on it because these things, they say, take time. But they did update us this afternoon on other leads they are tracking down. They are still working with Walmart management to see if they can isolate the person who purchased that backpack we see in the surveillance video. And there is also the pacemaker manufacturer. They said they're working with the pacemaker manufacturer and other experts to see if they can locate the device. And the sheriff also reiterated, Greta, today that the Guthrie family, that includes the siblings, it includes the spouses, they are not suspects. And this reiteration comes after he basically was chiding the media, as you know, Greta, yesterday for suggesting that the family was involved and even called it a cruel suggestion, and was really encouraging the media to report with compassion and professionalism. But, to be fair, and while there has been a lot of rumors swirling around, Greta, we've now more than a week out without any standalone press conference to really help separate fact from fiction. There's just these isolated interviews that are happening with media outlets here and there, and we're all having to then piece together the information rather than have a definitive, authoritative, standalone interview where you give an update to everyone involved, and you can really help tamp down on whatever whatever rumors are out there. Because as I know you've been in these situations, there's lines of media row here in front of the Nancy Guthrie's residence, in front of me, behind me, and when you have limited information and you have the throngs of media, it can certainly jumpstart rumors, and the sheriff wanted to get control over that. So it seems like a bust with the glove, but we're here tracking other leads, and as we hear new information, we'll certainly report that back to you. But for now, I'll just send it back to you, Greta.
Jason, before you go, I mean, look, the sheriff has no business chiding the media. This is the same guy who didn't secure the crime scene with blood on the porch and let people contaminate it, and who knows what else. I mean, he should spend more of his time investigating than spending time complaining about us. Yes, of course, we do get information wrong, not because we want to, but because we're fed stuff, and oftentimes by the sheriff's department to begin with. But having said that, do they believe that the ransom notes that have shown up at TMZ or at the local station in Tucson are legitimate, or do they think that they are hoaxes?
It's a great question, and one that has not definitively been answered. And we actually posed that question to the PIO a little while ago. And because that ransom note, which I've seen for myself, has two allegedly specific items to the home. It has the Apple Watch, that white Apple Watch that was supposedly at the foot of the bed, and a damaged floodlight in the backyard. Was there a damaged floodlight in the backyard? Was the Apple Watch at the foot of the bed? It seems like it could be pertinent information if that was a legit ransom note, but we just don't know. That's why, he's chiding the media, but there's very little information to go off at this point without the availability of a press conference and to ask the questions directly and for them to give a definitive timeline of what is actually going down. So it just makes it a very, difficult situation for those of us on the ground as we try to separate fact from fiction.
Jason Matera, thank you. And coming up, one final chance. That is the warning to Iran from President Trump. What is Iran's response? Plus, D.C. is known figuratively as the swamp. But now it is getting stinky, literally, not figuratively. President Trump is getting involved, too. That one, the record continues.
I'm Yalmer Heinrich. I'm in the nutritional business, primarily selling plant-derived minerals. Now, after being in this business for 43 years, owning a cancer hospital in Mexico, and associating with some of the most knowledgeable nutritional people in the world, I came to this conclusion. The world is sick due to a lack of minerals in our food, which is caused by a lack of minerals in topsoil. There is an incredible and proven nutritional product on the market that can overcome this problem. It's known as Immuno 150. This unusual food supplement contains 70 plant-derived minerals and 80 additional nutrients. There's nothing like it. You can learn everything about Immuno 150 by watching the 3 videos on our website. If you're interested, you can order online or call the number on the screen. Now, Immuno 150 is different, it's real, it's powerful, it's helped thousands, and we believe it enjoys the highest reorder rate in the industry.
Hello, everyone. It's President Donald J. Trump, and it's Trump time. Check out this red beauty. It's one of my new watches. Wear it proudly on your wrist, and everyone will know exactly what it's for, who it represents. It's really going to be something special. It's for your favorite president. Get your watch today at gettrumpwatches.com. Please make a great gift. It's Trump time.
You moved in. You nested.
Hey, what are you doing?
You partied. You cuddled. You made egg rolls. You slept in. Or tried to. And you kept growing. Now it's time for the next chapter. With Open Door, get an all-cash offer for your home in 24 hours. Because saying goodbye should be the hardest part. Move into your future with Open Door.
Well, this is it. Iran and the United States are at that moment, either a deal or else. And the or else, of course, is President Trump taking military action against Iran. President Trump has been warning Iran, so this will come as no surprise should Iran not make a deal about its nuclear program. Today, in a last-ditch effort, there are negotiations with Iran, but are we really close to an agreement, or is this just more talk? Foreign Affairs correspondent Alex Salvi joins me. Alex?
Yeah, Greta, a lot of people are asking exactly what comes next in this entire process. As of right now, the hope is that Iran in about 2 weeks will come to the United States with a more detailed proposal of what it's seeking, at which point there's hope that that'll help bridge the gap between these discussions. But at this point, there is reason to believe that there is not much progress being made. The talks in Geneva this morning have produced what's being referred to as an agreement on guiding principles. That's according to Tehran's foreign minister, but very much so falling short of an official deal. Now, of course, if true, granted that's coming from Tehran, it would provide the next steps for these talks, but there's still a lot of work to be done here, with Iran's foreign minister today insisting that his country does not and has not ever even pursued nuclear weapons.
The Islamic Republic of Iran has consistently affirmed that it neither seeks to manufacture nor to acquire nuclear weapons, which have no place whatsoever in Iran's national security doctrine.
Now, of course, those words being taken with a grain of salt. He adds that a new proposal will be delivered to the United States within the next 2 weeks, as I mentioned, but there are still questions as to whether President Trump is prepared to wait that long before abandoning diplomacy altogether. Now, Washington's show of force at this point is becoming impossible to ignore, with President Trump last week confirming that the USS Gerald Ford, the world's largest and most advanced aircraft carrier, is also being dispatched to the region. Approximately 1/3 of America's naval fleet is now positioned around Iran, meaning that military action could take place at any time and deliver a significant strike if diplomacy does fail to achieve the desired results. But Iran also flexing its military might, closing the Strait of Hormuz for several hours due to safety and maritime concerns as it conducted these live fire drills that you're looking at. It's the first time that Iran has closed that vital international waterway since the U.S. first began threatening military action, a sign that Tehran is preparing for the possibility of negotiations failing. And Greta, I will say that Vice President J.D. Vance, right before we came on air, did a separate interview, and he said that Iran is not abiding by a lot of the United States red lines.
You know, Alex, I think people have lost sight of something, is that there are two things on the table. The United States doesn't want Iran to have nuclear weapons. Of course, the whole world doesn't. And but that sort of loses sight of the fact that the civilians, they were getting slaughtered, and they want the United States to overthrow the Ayatollah and the regime. So and there's no discussion in the United States about that.
And there's no necessarily hierarchy, as we've talked about before, of exactly who would come next. We know that the exiled Shah's son, the Crown Prince, has said that he would go in there in a transitional nature as to help to facilitate a democratic election in the country. But there's still that big question about what comes next. And there's no guarantee that what comes next is better than what's currently in there. In many ways, the United States could be handing over a relatively advanced nuclear program to another hostile power. So who comes next is a big determinant of this.
And of course, the Shah's son was a child when he left in 1979 and hasn't been back since. So
right.
I'm not so sure the Iranian people want him, but I think probably anybody but at this point. Anyway, Alex Salvi, thank you.
Thank you, Greta.
Meanwhile, as noted, the slaughter continues. The attacks on Iranian civilians do not appear to be stopping. Iran International, which is an anti-regime media outlet based in London, has been reporting extensively on citizen protests against the Iranian regime. Today, Iranians held a 40-day memorial ceremony to honor those killed by the regime. One of those locations was in Abdanan, which is in western Iran. It is one of the cities that had the highest number of deaths during the protests. As Iran International reports, today mourners were gathering to honor those killed, and here's what happened. Research analyst with the Foundation for Defense of Democracy's Janatan Sayeh joins me. Good afternoon, sir. And, you know, do you agree with me that there's sort of two issues on the table? The one the United States is focusing on, which are Iran's nuclear weapon programs, which, of course, the foreign minister denies. And then the second one is what's happening to these civilians. And we see these videos replete when hearing gunshots and everything else. So tell me, do you have any sense of what the Iranian people want?
Certainly. So talking to folks on the ground and, of course, monitoring the chants coming from inside the country, it is very clear that the repression has not stopped. more importantly, the execution of political prisoners has not stopped. Despite what Tehran may have signaled to the administration, that repression is ongoing. But I think this time around, what really sets this wave apart is the fact that it has a leader. It is not a scattered act of protest. It is increasingly becoming a revolutionary movement. That's what Iranians on the ground are calling it. And once the Crown Prince actually called on protesters to take place, we saw the biggest surge, the largest anti-regime demonstration in the history of the Islamic Republic. So it is increasingly indicative of the fact that Iranians have not only expressed that they want to move away from the Islamic Republic, but they've actually decided what they want to have as a transition following the regime collapse, or really a democratic transition.
Of course, you know, he hasn't been elected. I don't know who's calling for this. And of course, you have the danger that if the United States goes in and beheads the government, gets rid of the Ayatollah, or there's regime change, there's nobody to immediately step in. So there's probably going to be a power grab, not just with the Crown Prince, but with other, which might, of course, contribute to chaos. But aside from those ugly topics or possibilities, tell me this, is that if the United States strikes a deal with Iran on the nuclear weapons program, one to the satisfaction of President Trump, and that can be corroborated and verified, what are the Iranian people going to think if the United States now then says, okay, we got a deal, and walks away at that point and doesn't do any sort of regime change?
That certainly risks alienating the Iranian public. And you're talking about protesters that actually responded to President Trump saying, occupy government institutions. So they went out nationwide, and of course, it would really be a betrayal to the Middle East's largest anti-Islamist movement that has been responsive to this administration's calls for protest or support. So again, that sends the wrong message, and of course, is strategically not in our interest, because even in the past, where Washington has enacted a deal with the Islamic Republic, they've continued to enrich uranium in undeclared locations with of course, weaponization ambitions. So any deal is not going to get you regime behavior change. It's ultimately, if you want to neutralize all the threats coming from the Islamic Republic, and of course nuclear is just one of them, there's the ballistic missiles, there's the terror support, and of course is the mass killing of protesters. No deal, sanctions, or negotiations has ever changed that. The only way really, there's no way out but through from the Iranian people's perspective. And you know, the opposition that is currently being, of course, led by the Crown Prince does have a day after plan on how to fill that vacuum. Of course, as I mentioned, this regime being inherently anti-Islamist, the Islamists being the ones in charge, realistically, day after, it is unlikely for it to be that chaotic as we are worried. It is not going to be an Iraq or an Afghanistan situation because of where society is headed right now.
In 1979, when the Islamic Revolution occurred and the Shah of Iran, the Crown Prince's father, left, what was the level of popularity for the Crown Prince's father, the Shah of Iran?
The key point here is that the majority of Iranian population right now is right about 30.
I know, but I think that's an important question, because I think we have to be realistic as how people might feel on the ground, as much as we want certain things to happen in a certain way. But the Shah was immensely unpopular with his own people at the time, and maybe some of the people aren't alive now because 1979 is a good bit away. It's 45 years or so away. Is that their parents and their grandparents, they've heard things, so it's not that easy as just to have the Crown Prince come in and take over.
It's evidently going to be very challenging. But again, we have to focus on what would be the main issues with a democratic transition in this context. We want to ensure, first of all, national stability. The leader who's going to be leading this transition has to ensure that has national legitimacy to prevent any form of separatist movements taking place. Again, the Crown Prince would realistically be the only viable option. The economy is in desperate need of revival. And again, the current Crown Prince, the current opposition, is the only one that is in great ties with America, being able to ensure sanctions relief. But again, once you look at what happened last month, you see people from all over the country, and it's not just major cities like Tehran. Once the Crown Prince called on protesters, we saw them wave the pre-1979 flag. We heard chants of "This is the final battle path, we will return." So I think it's very important for us not to impose on Iranians what we want to see. We have to be reactionary to what they want and who they have chosen, at least as a transition figure.
Okay, I'm going to take the last one, but they, quote, haven't chosen. I mean, there's people chanting for them, I get that, but there has been no vote. The Iranian people have not chosen. I mean, they are in complete chaos and disarray, fear, and they're being slaughtered. So Anyway, I don't have the answer, and perhaps we can discuss it more later. Janatan Sayeh, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Coming up, TMZ has now received a fourth email from the person claiming to know who kidnapped Nancy Guthrie and where she is. TMZ executive producer Charles Latibeaudiere joins me when the record continues.
He loves the Constitution. He fights for what's right. He hates the bad guys. He's a freedom warrior. He's your freedom warrior. Watch Carl Higbie every weeknight on Newsmax.
If anyone has told you that gaining weight, feeling tired, and joint issues is just a part of getting older, they are wrong. My name is Dr. Stephen Gundry, and I found a new way to support my health. It's called BioComplete 3. BioComplete 3 works by restoring your gut health from the inside out. This is working for everybody.
I was 270. I'm now 140. It just feels amazing.
You can try BioComplete 3 risk-free for 90 days.
Go to GundryMD.com/TV.
You deserve high quality. You really do. At Balance of Nature, we don't cut corners. We could cut corners or extract individual vitamins and minerals rather than source whole foods. But that's not who we are. We don't isolate one specific part and sell it alone. Why? Because phytonutrients are woven into the whole plant. Everything works together as one complete package the way nature intended. Balance of Nature supplements aren't dried juice or a powdered extract. They are a vibrant mix of ingredients of 47 whole fruits, vegetables, spices, and fibers. Each ingredient then goes through a tailored vacuum-cooled process, is grounded into a fine powder, and packed into plant-based capsules in order to preserve those naturally occurring phytonutrients. We are real ingredients only, always. Start your journey with Balance of Nature supplements. Go to balanceofnature.com and subscribe and save today.
All exposure to products that contain asbestos can be harmful. If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with mesothelioma, please call. Our firm has been exclusively dedicated to mesothelioma victims for decades. Let us meet you in your home, office, anywhere, and offer you our MesoCare promise. Our dedication to you is unmatched. Call now for our free book.
Call 800-801-8000 or go to mesobook.com.
Don't kibble your dog.
Hey, Dr. Marty.
Hey, back.
What's wrong with this?
Let's check it out. It's still kibble, which means they're ultra-processed. At Dr. Marty, we freeze-dried premium meats, fruits, and vegetables, and they're gonna love it.
Joining us is Dr. Drew from the Wellness Company with advice for dealing with seasonal colds and flu. Doctor?
Cold and flu season is here, and every year you or a loved one gets sick. Your doctor can't see you. Waiting in a crowded urgent care is brutal. This is a particularly bad cold and flu season, and it's why doctors suggest every family needs an emergency medical kit. Your medical emergency kit is filled with essential prescriptions. It includes antibiotics like generic Z-Pak to get well faster, amoxicillin for pneumonia, strep throat, ear infections, plus prescriptions for nausea and UTIs, and even ivermectin. It's easy. Just match your symptoms to the prescription in your guidebook or call the telemedicine doctor standing by. Take your medication early and feel better faster. Having a medical emergency kit is like having an urgent care in your home. No waiting to see a doctor, no lines at the pharmacy.
Smart advice. We've shared the website and discount code below to save viewers $45. Order now and your kit will be rushed to your door. Thank you, doctor.
It's day 17, still no word about Nancy Guthrie. TMZ has now received a fourth email from the person claiming to know who kidnapped the 84-year-old mother and where she is. The email demands a Bitcoin payment for this information and reads in part, quote, "I know what I saw 5 days ago south of the border, and I was told to shut up, so I know who he is, and that was definitely Nancy with him," end quote. TMZ executive producer Charles Latibeaudiere joins me. Charles, if that person is telling the truth, Nancy Guthrie is alive, or at least was 5 days ago.
Yeah, that's the takeaway here is that 5 days ago, and we received that late Sunday night. So we're guessing that they're referring to Wednesday, and they also make reference very clearly to the fact that there's more than one person involved in this. Look, this person, whoever they are, has been reaching out to us now for almost a week. And almost daily, and they have yet to produce this information. If they're making it up, clearly it is a crime. that's fraud they're committing. And if they do have the information, we would love to hear from them and actually hear that information. It's clear that they don't trust the FBI. They think the FBI doesn't trust them. So, we're willing to play middleman here if they want to produce that information.
Well, we now return to this glove. Is that, look, we all wanted that glove to have DNA that would tell us the color of the eyes, the gender, whoever was, everything, who took Nancy Guthrie. But it was 2 miles from the home, and I got a house full of single gloves that gloves. Gloves are all over every place, and 2 miles away. And yet, it was sort of weird how almost like the FBI and Pima County sheriffs hung it out like this is a big break. And of course, we took the bait and said, because we didn't want to deny it. And now look, it was nothing, or at least so far nothing.
Yeah, so far nothing came back on the results. There's nothing in the CODIS system, and we know that it doesn't match the DNA that the Pima County Sheriff's Department says they found in Nancy's home. So we're kind of back at square one. Yes, they have some DNA from that glove, but there's nothing to say that it has anything to do with this crime. By the way, that photo that the New York Post got of the glove, we were told that is not even the glove that was tested. There were a lot of gloves apparently found out in that area. So, while everyone was hopeful that that was going to be something, it has turned out to be nothing. It doesn't match anything connected to the case. And so, authorities are back just doing, the word that was used to us this morning is gumshoe, that they're just doing gumshoe detective work out there trying to find any connection in the community. And maybe the latest thing that they're hoping is going to turn out, lead them to someone, is this holster on that individual that you were just showing in the video at Nancy's front door. This person was using a very unique holster. It's made of polyester. It is intended for a revolver, yet this person had a semi-automatic handgun. And we're told that that's something that the FBI is tracking down actively right now in Tucson, going to gun shops, trying to find someone.
It seems to me that another possibility is that, apparently the jacket's from Walmart, the backpack is from Walmart, and it seems to me that, I imagine Walmart, like everybody else, they keep track of everything all of us does, all our purchase and everything. Yep. But if a jacket and a backpack were bought the same day, that would at least sort of narrow the field, because I imagine Walmart is assisting in some way. But I imagine that they're trying to, obviously they're desperate to get information.
Yeah, they're going to be reaching out. We've been checking, by the way, there are 9 different Walmarts and Walmart supercenters in the greater Tucson area. And, we're calling them, I'm sure, the FBI or the Pima County Sheriff's Department doing the same, trying to find someone. Look, Greta, the perfect storm would be to find someone who purchased the backpack, who purchased the jacket at a Walmart, and also purchased this holster either at a Walmart or at a gun shop. And we know that the FBI has been making the rounds at gun stores around the Tucson area asking that question. By the way, they've already narrowed it down to 40 people who purchased that particular holster in the Tucson area. And so that's why they're going with a list of names.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good lead to do 40. Anyway. Charles, as always, TMZ is doing a great job. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Greta.
Baptist minister, 2-time presidential candidate, and civil rights activist, Reverend Jesse Jackson, has passed away. Today, his family confirmed his death in a statement. That statement reads in part, quote, "He died peacefully on Tuesday morning, surrounded by his family. Our father was a servant leader not only to our family, but to the oppressed, the voiceless, and the overlooked around the world. We shared him with the world, and in return, the world became part of our extended family. His unwavering belief in justice, equality, and love uplifted millions, and we ask you to honor his memory by continuing the fight for the values he lived by," end quote. In 2017, Jackson revealed he had Parkinson's, and then back in November, Jackson was admitted to a hospital for more than a decade. He'd been living with progressive supranuclear palsy. PSP affects patients' ability to walk and swallow and can lead to dangerous complications. Reverend Jesse Jackson was 84 years old and a one of a kind.
Hey, I'm Carl Higbee from Newsmax. Look, I'm unapologetically pro-American, and honestly, this is the one place that lets me call it how it is. I'm not holding back. I'll give it to you straight every single night.
You have seen the false headlines about Israel and the influencers spreading lies. The consequences are devastating.
Radical Islamists supporting regimes have launched a multi-billion-dollar media campaign aimed at convincing American youth to hate Israel.
Friends of Zion is fighting the propaganda head on. For the first time in history, more than 1,000 American pastors and leaders have gathered in the Holy Land. This is not a political movement, it is a spiritual one. A generation is being called to stand for truth.
That Israel that you see on social media is not what it is.
We need to get the story out.
We saw the faces, we felt the emotions.
If this was in our neighborhood, this wouldn't be allowed to stand.
Visit FOZ.TV to join us at this crucial time and watch the full story of 1,000 American pastors on this journey of a lifetime.
What's gold is new again, pardon the pun. But considering gold has been used as currency since around 550 BC, it has been on fire the past year. I'm here with Daniel Boston, the founder of Preserve Gold. Why is gold so stable and such a good investment for many people?
Take the central bank, for example, the Federal Reserve. They print money out of thin air, and then they take that printed money to go buy hard assets like gold to protect themselves against the very risks that they're creating. So I always tell people, don't do what the big players are telling you to do. Do what they're doing themselves.
Yeah, watch what they're doing.
That's correct.
Okay. If people are interested in investing with Preserve Gold, how do they get started?
Text Newsmax to 50505 to get your free information and up to $15,000 in free gold and silver with a qualified purchase. That's right. Text Newsmax to 50505.
All right. No way you can miss it.
The sound of an American original. It's the Omaha Steaks President's Day event, and we're celebrating with our President's Day assortment, all for just $99.99. Save 50% site-wide and get free burgers when you visit omahasteaks.com/TV today.
I'm Yalmer Heinrich. I'm in the nutritional business, primarily selling plant-derived minerals. Now, after being in this business for 43 years, owning a cancer hospital in Mexico, and associating with some of the most knowledgeable nutritional people in the world, I came to this conclusion. The world is sick due to a lack of minerals in our food, which is caused by a lack of minerals in topsoil. There is an incredible and proven nutritional product on the market that can overcome this problem. It's known as Immuno 150. This unusual food supplement contains 70 plant-derived minerals and 80 additional nutrients. There's nothing like it. You can learn everything about Immuno 150 by watching the 3 videos on our website. If you're interested, you can order online or call the number on the screen. Now, Immuno 150 is different, it's real, it's powerful, it's helped thousands, and we believe it enjoys the highest reorder rate in the industry.
Well, Europe had no idea what to expect this year. Would it be another lecture and scolding? Last year at the Munich Security Conference, Vice President J.D. Vance took an aggressive approach towards Europe. Some even described it as scolding.
Unfortunately, when I look at Europe today, it's sometimes not so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners.
Well, the Europeans did not take that speech well. In their view, Vice President Vance was a guest on their home turf and lectured them. Well, on Saturday, Secretary of State Marco Rubio took a different approach. He discussed wanting unity with the Europeans.
For the United States and Europe, we belong together. Because for us Americans, our home may be in the Western Hemisphere, but we will always be a child of Europe.
Secretary Rubio's speech was so well received, it got a standing ovation from the European audience. But you know who did not approve of the speech? some American Democrats who attended the conference.
What we heard this morning was, in truth, not too much in substance.
And then there was this. President Trump's political rival, Hillary Clinton. She bashed the president when it came to the topic of Ukraine.
I think that the Trump administration's position toward Ukraine is disgraceful. I think the effort to force Ukraine into a surrender deal with Putin is shameful. I think the effort that Putin and Trump are making to profit off the misery and death of the Ukrainian people is a historic error and corrupt to the nth degree. I think Trump either doesn't understand or could care less about that suffering. He has betrayed the West. He's betrayed human values. He's betrayed the NATO Charter, the Atlantic Charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. A lot of what has been done before to try to make sense of how difficult it is to restrain people who want unaccountable power. And none of us in this room, including all of us on this panel, would choose to live under a regime that was so unaccountable that it could act with impunity the way that Putin does, except that's who Trump is modeling himself after.
Yes, you heard that correctly. Hillary Clinton says Trump is modeling himself after Vladimir Putin. CEO of Hermitage Capital Management, head of the global Magnitsky Justice Campaign, Bill Browder, joins me. Nice to talk to you, sir. And obviously, very harsh words from the former Secretary of State and Vice President and presidential candidate. She didn't receive, doesn't seem she receives Trump very well, so I assume by extension, Secretary of State Marco Rubio. But what did the sense the Europeans have of Secretary Rubio and President Trump?
Well, so I was at Munich. I was at Munich last year when J.D. Vance gave that speech, and I was at Munich this year when Marco Rubio gave the speech. And I think that everybody in Europe were pretty shocked last year when J.D. Vance gave a speech where he criticized the Europeans and didn't criticize Vladimir Putin. And I think everyone had such low expectations after the J.D. Vance speech that when Marco Rubio came in and started talking about shared values and shared history, there was such a relief, a wave of relief that went over all of the European diplomats that you saw them all standing up and giving him a standing ovation. And so I think, people, particularly after the whole Greenland takeover stuff that was happening a few weeks ago, I think that people were really relieved that an American diplomat was coming in, speaking diplomatically and speaking about shared values.
Well, there's so many world leaders speak, and I was at the one last year, and Vice President J.D. Vance, I mean, he stopped everybody. I mean, that's all anybody talked about was that speech. But having said that, what is the purpose of the Munich Security Conference?
Well, historically, the Munich Security Conference was a place where Americans and Europeans got together and discussed joint security initiatives when it comes to enemies like Russia, China, Iran, et cetera. And it consists of foreign ministers, generals, defense ministers, and various different people around the security establishment. And it's a great way for a lot of people to see each other in a very short period of time. I mean, when I was there, I was able to meet with about a dozen foreign ministers to discuss sanctions on Russia. Those kinds of meetings would have taken 3 months if I had to travel to all the different countries and try to arrange those meetings. So it's a very useful gathering to come to consensus and try to find ways of common approach towards enemies and people causing trouble around the world.
Well, it's pretty, I mean, look, it's obvious President Trump can dish it out, too. I get that. But I was surprised by former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and even Congresswoman AOC because, they are on foreign soil. And they were so highly critical of President Trump and American policy. And, the old days is that you wait until he came back home a little bit. So I was a little bit surprised. Maybe we just isolate a few sound bites. But it does seem like we're in a different time.
Well, I mean, I think that everybody has been speaking their mind about a lot of things on both sides of the aisle. We certainly hear the president. He's not holding back, and they're not holding back. I think that restraint has been lifted on everybody. But I mean, the reality is on the ground in Munich, it wasn't so much talking about Donald Trump or Putin. It was talking about what the Europeans needed to do to basically come together and figure out how to support Ukraine. At this point, Europe is the only financial backer for Ukraine. Europe has now stepped into the shoes that the Americans had before, and so the question was, and the question continues to be, how do the people who care about Ukraine support Ukraine and make sure that Ukraine doesn't lose against Vladimir Putin? And I think it was very productive in that regard.
And I think people, especially, it's like when you don't live in the war, we're coming up on the 4-year mark, and the estimates of 2 million people have died. I don't know if those are civilians, including soldiers or whatever, but you sort of get war weary, and Ukraine seems so far away that it's often easy to forget that the Ukrainians are freezing cold, their kids are terrified, they got food issues, they got all this, I mean, it's just, it is such an ugly war, but it's been dragging on so long. But I'll give you the last word on this.
Well, I think everyone needs to remember that Ukraine is the victim, Russia is the aggressor. Ukraine would like to end this war at any point. Russia and Vladimir Putin don't want to end this war, and the key at this point is to do whatever we can to pressure Vladimir Putin to stop killing Ukrainians, and that should be the one and only objective at this stage for everybody, the United States, Europe, and everybody else who cares about peace, justice, and going forward in a safe world.
Bill Browder, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
In Italy, Americans are making history. Ilana Myers-Taylor has become the most decorated U.S. female bobsledder in history. This after she just won gold in the monobob. The monobob is a solo bobsledding event. The mother of 2 and 41 years old has now had 5 trips to Winter Olympics. She already has 3 silver medals and 2 bronze medals. But it is this trip, her 5th, where she got the gold. That's not all. With this win, she's now the oldest American woman at 41 years old to win gold at the Winter Olympics. By the way, what's the average age of a U.S. Olympian in the Winter Olympics? 28 years old. Coming up, Jeffrey Epstein strikes again. Find out who just resigned when the record continues.
Healthcare is broken. America's health share is different. We believe healthcare should be aligned with your values, empowering individuals to direct their own care, personalized preventative care with cutting-edge services, early detection and root cause resolution, no skyrocketing premiums, no surprise bills, no financial uncertainty. This is not insurance. This is the health freedom model. Join us. Scan the QR code to get started.
Joining us is Dr. Drew from the Wellness Company with advice for dealing with seasonal colds and flu. Doctor?
Cold and flu season is here, and every year you or a loved one gets sick. Your doctor can't see you. Waiting in a crowded urgent care is brutal. This is a particularly bad cold and flu season, and it's why doctors suggest every family needs an emergency medical kit. Your medical emergency kit is filled with essential prescriptions. It includes antibiotics like generic Z-Pak to get well faster, amoxicillin for pneumonia, strep throat, ear infections, plus prescriptions for nausea and UTIs, and even ivermectin. It's easy. Just match your symptoms to the prescription in your guidebook or call the telemedicine doctor standing by. Take your medication early and feel better faster. Having a medical emergency kit is like having an urgent care in your home. No waiting to see a doctor, no lines at the pharmacy.
Smart advice. We've shared the website and discount code below to save viewers $45. Order now and your kit will be rushed to your door. Thank you, doctor.
I really love Balance of Nature.
There's so many vegetables and so many fruits.
I love everything about it.
The brightness of the colors is an indication of the freshness.
I love the freeze-dried process. I love the easiness of it.
Balance of Nature really is just such a phenomenal product. So you got to keep doing it.
Start your journey with Balance of Nature supplements. Go to balanceofnature.com and subscribe and save today.
I was tired of being exhausted at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and constantly suffering from brain fog.
Toxic EMF radiation is coming from your cell phone and smart devices and being absorbed by your body.
We don't see EMFs. It's out of sight, out of mind.
That's why people around the world are choosing Bodywell. Bodywell's technology holds a harmonic pattern that helps your body respond better to EMF exposure, reducing EMF radiation absorption up to 80%. Just peel, stick, and protect.
This little device changed everything.
Bodywell's BioCard protects your entire body. Simply place it in your pocket.
I didn't believe in EMF protection until I actually felt the difference.
I sleep much better, more like a baby.
I mean, my kids are my world, and I want to do everything I can to protect them and give them a better life.
Order your BioCard today, and for a limited time, get a BioChip, a $99 value for free. Go to Bodywell.com. That's Bodywell.com.
Disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein strikes again from the grave. The latest, Thomas Pritzker, a billionaire heir to the Hyatt Hotel's fortune. He is resigned effective immediately from his position as executive chairman of the Hyatt Hotels Corporation. Recently released files by the Department of Justice show that Pritzker was in regular contact with Epstein following Epstein's 2008 plea deal on sex crime charges. In the released exchanges between the two, Pritzker confirmed meals and appointments at Epstein's Manhattan townhouse. And yesterday, Pritzker released a letter that reads in part, quote, "Good stewardship also means protecting Hyatt, particularly in the context of my association with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, which I deeply regret. I exercised terrible judgment in maintaining contact with them, and there is no excuse for failing to distance myself sooner," end quote. Here's a little political trivia. Thomas Pritzker is the cousin of Democratic Governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, who some predict will run for president in 2028. And now the update on a story we have been following for a few weeks. On January 19th, a pipe burst, pouring hundreds of millions of gallons of raw sewage into the Potomac River. It's one of the largest sewage spills in history. You've heard people call D.C. a swamp. Well, now you can call it stinky with the sewage. None of us residents is happy about this, including our temporary resident, President Trump. Guess who he's blaming? Well, yesterday the president took to Truth Social to say in part, quote, "There is a massive ecological disaster unfolding in the Potomac River as a result of gross mismanagement of local Democrat leaders, particularly Governor Wes Moore of the state of Maryland," end quote. Now, following that criticism from the president, a spokesperson for Governor Moore told The Hill, quote, "The president has his facts wrong again. Since the last century, the federal government has been responsible for the Potomac Interceptor, which is the origin of the sewage leak. For the last 4 weeks, the Trump administration has failed to act, shirking its responsibility and putting people's health at risk," end quote. By the way, more trivia, remember this. In May of last year, U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was photographed swimming in D.C.'s Rock Creek with his grandchildren. Rock Creek is a major tributary of the Potomac River. That creek has a 50-year swimming ban due to the high levels of bacteria, including E. coli and sewage runoff. I'm not so sure Secretary Kennedy wants to swim there now. Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner for Ward 5 in Washington, D.C., Kathy Henderson joins me. Kathy, nice to see you. And, even if it's feds, Maryland, D.C., or whatever, it's D.C.
Thank you, Greta. This is a critical issue, and I really don't want to hear any partisan bickering. I'm glad that that President Trump is focused on this issue. This is a major public health crisis, and we need to step it up. That's D.C., Maryland, and Virginia to make sure that people are not drinking contaminated water. We have aging infrastructure. We've known we've had aging infrastructure, and we are not moving fast enough. There's been some progress with the Northeast Boundary Tunnel project, but not enough. We should never, ever have to worry about sewage being dumped into our rivers.
Yeah, it says that January 19th, 200 million gallons of wastewater. I mean, this was an accident waiting to happen. I mean, it's like, I don't know. This was not like someone dropped a bomb on it and suddenly all the sewage comes out. I mean, this is just neglect.
It is neglect. It's an ongoing problem. I'm also a member of the Citizens Advisory Group for PEPCO, and we've been working very diligently to address PEPCO's issues with the Anacostia, and the quality of the water has always been an issue. And I've really gone back and forth with the director of DDOE, which is a good friend of mine, Richard Jackson, and I said, please don't issue any advisories to the public saying it's safe to swim in the water, because it's not. There's no safe level of E. coli in our water.
Well, even beyond that, even if you don't drink it or swim it, I mean, everyone gets water, who lives here gets water elsewhere or doesn't swim in it. The thing that always, another thing that bothers me is that we think this is sort of our little secret, and the whole world knows that Washington, D.C., with the river that goes right through the city, that we all look at every single day, probably 10 times, is a disgusting, disgusting place, and now has all those gallons of wastewater. It's like, we criticize some other countries. I've seen, trash in Bangladesh and India and stuff, but look at us.
It's a needless, dirty secret, and we need to fix it, and we need to fix it now. I'm looking forward to bipartisan collaboration. I thank President Trump for his interest in addressing this issue. He's focused very correctly on the issues that matter. This is a serious public health problem, and we want to make sure that any resources that the president can marshal on behalf of D.C., Maryland, and Virginia to fix our waterways, God bless him.
What about the rest of our infrastructure here? Because it makes me a little bit nervous. Now I see this.
It's a sad state of affairs. Our roadways are filled with potholes. Thankfully, there's an effort after this massive failed snow removal effort to fix some of the potholes, but we have a lot of aging infrastructure that is making the lives of district residents and our commuters, our visitors to the nation's capital, making lives miserable, and that just should not be the state of affairs.
Well, I don't think, it's hard to think right now that in the middle of summer when it's 2,000 degrees here in D.C., and all of a sudden we have a bad storm and the power goes down, you got these elderly people in these hot apartments, and you don't think of it now because we're all freezing cold, but there's so much, our infrastructure, or even in the winter when people don't have heat, which seems less common as what happens in the summer, but it really is such an aged, disgusting situation.
It is. DDOT, our District Department of Transportation, needs to be front and center, and they need to really step it up. Ms. Kirschbaum needs to step it up and get the team mobilized to start fixing the roadways, addressing things aggressively for the benefit of our residents.
Kathy Henderson, thank you.
God bless you. Thank you.
Media giant Conde Nast has started a dogfight with a tiny magazine. Conde Nast is the owner of Vogue magazine, is suing a magazine called Dogue. Conde Nast accuses Dogue of trademark infringement. Dogue magazine launched in 2019. It features dog fashion. The magazine is owned by Ollie Port, a dog mother in Beverly Hills. Port says she started the magazine to be playful, a playful take on fashion culture. She says the magazine has, quote, always been clearly branded, transparently authored, and rooted in humor, art, and love for dogs, end quote. But Conde Nast says it's a ripoff. In the lawsuit they filed on December 5, Conde Nast shows photos posted online by Dogue. The photos show Dogue magazine placed next to Vogue magazine on a newsstand. Conde Nast says this shows a false appearance of association with Vogue. Conde Nast also cites a quote from Dogue's website, which has since been taken down. It said Dogue was, quote, created in the style of Vogue. According to its lawsuit, Conde Nast wants Dogue to be shut down. It also wants the Dogue trademark application denied, and it wants unspecified damages. Okay, I don't know about you, but I think Vogue is a tad bit too sensitive on this one, but you decide. Coming up, he has served longer than Kim Jong-un and Xi Jinping. Who is it? Start guessing. That when the record continues.
Newsmax.
Shoots it straight. No talking down to me.
Don't tell me how to think.
Don't tell me how to think.
Don't tell me how to think.
I trust Newsmax. Newsmax.
They don't tell me how to think. They let me decide.
Real news for real people.
Parents
Parents, America's big birthday is coming up and your kids want an invite to the party. Let them join the fun with the Kids Guide to America's 250th birthday, a free guide that helps kids celebrate the epic story of our nation's birth. Send your kids back in time to see our brave founding fathers signing the Declaration and get them ready for this year's massive celebration. Get the Kids Guide to America's 250th birthday for free at freeusagift.com. That's freeusagift.com.
I'm Yalmer Heinrich. I'm in the nutritional business, primarily selling plant-derived minerals. Now, after being in this business for 43 years, owning a cancer hospital in Mexico, and associating with some of the most knowledgeable nutritional people in the world, I came to this conclusion. The world is sick due to a lack of minerals in our food, which is caused by a lack of minerals in topsoil. There is an incredible and proven nutritional product on the market that can overcome this problem. It's known as Immuno 150. This unusual food supplement contains 70 plant-derived minerals and 80 additional nutrients. There's nothing like it. You can learn everything about Immuno 150 by watching the 3 videos on our website. If you're interested, you can order online or call the number on the screen. Now, Immuno 150 is different, it's real, it's powerful, it's helped thousands, and we believe it enjoys the highest pre-order rate in the industry.
Hello everyone, it's President Donald J. Trump, and it's Trump time. Check out this red beauty, it's one of my new watches. Wear it proudly on your wrist, and everyone will know exactly what it's for, who it represents. It's really gonna be something special. It's for your favorite president. Get your watch today at gettrumpwatches.com. Please make a great gift. It's Trump time.
$12,720. That's the average cost you pay for term life insurance over 20 years. $12,720 that you could spend on family, loved ones, or yourself. With a return of premium life insurance plan from Senior Life, getting all that money back is possible. That's right. With return of premium life insurance, we don't save you hundreds of dollars, we save you thousands, because we give you all your money back. It works like this. If you pass away while you're insured, your loved ones get a check for the coverage amount you chose. But if you're still living at the end of the term, you get back all the money you paid, guaranteed. Spend it any way you wish. Why would you buy life insurance from another company when Senior Life gives you all your money back? Get all your money back with return of premium life insurance from Senior Life. Call the number now for free information. You have no obligation. Call now.
Don't kibble your dog.
Hey, Dr. Marty.
Hey, back.
What's wrong with this?
Let's check it out. It's still kibble, which means they're ultra-processed. At Dr. Marty, we freeze-dried premium meats, fruits, and vegetables, and they're gonna love it.
Sponsored by Dr. Marty Nature's Blend, the health of fresh food with the convenience of kibble. Visit drmartypets.com/TV.
Congratulations to the British officials celebrating 15 years. It is Larry the cat. Larry is the chief mouser of 10 Downing Street. The tabby cat was recruited for this high-profile job back in 2011 by then Prime Minister David Cameron. Larry has worked under 6 British Prime Ministers, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak, and now the current Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. Larry's duties: greeting guests, inspecting security defenses, and testing furniture for nap quality, of course. He's also known for photobombing when important leaders come to visit. In 2019, when President Trump visited, Larry was spotted taking a nap under the Beast, which, of course, is our U.S. president's car. Thank you for watching. Ed Henry, then The Big Take is next. Stay with Newsmax.